But I just want to say I hope you've had a good day, and if you haven't, hopefully you have a good evening now. We'll have a good time, and I'm going to ask you to please mute your microphones unless you actually have a question that you want to ask, and if you have any problems, any feedback on your mics, if you could just use the chat window. I've put up the chat window so you can do that. If you want to ask a question, we'll have questions and answers at the end, but if anything comes up as we go through, please do use your chat. And also, after I've done the first few slides and introduced the topic, I'm going to do a bit of interactive work with you to get you to give me some feedback on what you think I'm showing you, what it means, what you can see. So please do use those chat rooms or switch on your audio to speak to me. But if we get a lot of feedback or interference, you can switch it off again and just go into the chat room. Okay, Yusuf Hachido is saying he can't hear anything. Can a few others just let me know, can you hear me? I've got my sound on.
Yes, hello.
Hello, yes, hi.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So I'm sorry about this, but we have a problem with, there's some people saying they can't hear me. Okay, I think most of you are clicking that you can. So someone who said that they couldn't at the beginning, maybe just check on your mic and your sound, because it looks like everyone else who's answered has said they can hear me. So I don't want to slow things up. If any of you does have a problem and misses out for any reason, please note that Illuminations in the next day or two will put this online on their website, so you can view it again if you miss it, if you lose your connection or you don't hear me for any reason, and it will be recorded. Okay, yeah. So let's get started. What I'm going to be talking about is informative, hopefully as practical as possible, and I'm going to be putting slides up in a moment to just, now that was up before, but now for some reason I'm getting one of the participants. So, okay, just shut that down. Okay, so sorry about this. We had no problems last week when we were online, and I don't know why it's happening now, because I want to share my screen with you of something that a slideshow that I have to show you. I'm just going to put the slideshow back up again and then see what's happening here. I might have to ask Phil to come and help me with this, because we haven't had this problem before, not being able to get the slides to come up. Phil, can you come and give me a hand here, please? Right, I'm trying to share the screen, and I had the slides up and everything before. Now I'm seeing the people, the participants, but I'm not seeing my slideshow. Yeah, I've got that. Well, it is open, look. Presenter mode. Okay. Right, but now I need to go back to Zoom. Where? I'm really sorry about this, folks. I said we've had successful webinars over the last week or so, and we haven't had this problem at all. I'm just going to go out again. If you can all just be patient for a moment, because the slides are an important part of what I want to show you tonight. See, this is what I want to show. Slides, come up. Hey, can anyone see the slides? Can someone come out, put their audio on and let me know if you can see the slides that I have on screen?
No, we can't. No.
No, they haven't got the slides, but I can't do it without the slides.
Yeah, Dr. Amina.
I'm just, excuse me, folks. I'm just going to come out of this again, and I'm going to just, yeah, see if I can come back in, because this is. I don't
No, it has come now. It has come now. The slides have come.
The slides have just come.
Yeah, we can see now.
Okay, and is it Bit crazy because I can't at the moment see them.
It says need resources on using Zoom during COVID-19 pandemic. That's the slide which is coming up on the screen.
Need resources, what's that? Use, no, that's not the correct slides.
COVID-19.
I'm going to go out and I'm going to sign in again. So if you can just be patient for a moment, just do some nice deep breathing, and we'll be with you as soon as possible.
We can see your screen. If you on your screen, you go to on your PowerPoint.
Don't leave.
No, just go on your PowerPoint.
Go to your PowerPoint and open the PowerPoint.
Yeah, because we can see your screen. We just don't see your PowerPoint because your
see
screen.
my screen now. Okay, right. Okay, we'll try again.
Yeah, we can see.
Now open this. Yeah, now we can.
Right.
When you open this, it will show up.
Okay, it's opening now.
Great.
Right.
That's where you are. Thanks.
Go into
Now put-
slideshow mode. Okay, so you can see it now.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thanks. That's all your concentration, I'm sure of it. Okay. Right. So, and I'm just going to make sure that you can you see me and hear me as well?
Yes.
Great. Okay, that's wonderful. All right, so we'll get started. So that's me, and you can see me as well. Our theme is emotional intelligence, or EQ as it's sometimes known. We're going to look at the practical applications of positive and behavioral psychology, and the focus is on how emotions work. And I'm also going to talk about what we're starting to call HQ, which is the happiness quotient, or sometimes called the happiness advantage. So what I'm going to cover is how emotions work, understanding how emotions work, becoming aware of the 7 universal emotions that get expressed through the 5 communication channels that all human beings have. I'm going to talk about how you learn to recognize your own hot triggers and how emotions can get you into trouble sometimes, becoming aware of the impulses as they arise, becoming aware when you're in the grip of an emotion, developing self-monitoring capabilities, and starting to learn how to prime yourself for happiness, so that, like one of those Weeble toys that children have, you push them over but they bounce back up again, that happiness becomes a default program. And the interesting thing nowadays is that we've actually got neuroscience that's helping us to demonstrate that positive psychology actually works from a biological empirical point of view. We're also going to the last part of what we're going to do is to recognize emotions in others to aid a deeper understanding, and to how you're going to use that information to help you to work with other people constructively as well as yourself. So the psychological components of the human mind are made up of emotion and cognition. So I hope you can all see that, that little diagram there. So these are expressed through we experience things through the 5 senses and through the 5 communication channels, all of which constantly interact with each other. Emotion and cognition back and forth all the time, and of course that's feeding into the body. This slide illustrates how those interactions occur, and it's based on the work of Dr. Paul Ekman. Now, I don't know if you recognize that name, but if you've ever seen the series on Fox TV, Lie to Me, or the BBC program, The Human Face, or indeed you've seen Disney's, Pixar's The Inside Out movie, many movies are actually based on Dr. Ekman's work. He researched this work for over half a century. He's considered to be one of the most influential psychologists in the world, and he's collaborated with people like Daniel Goleman, the Dalai Lama, many people who've written books about emotional intelligence. And he started out his research actually working cross-culturally. He worked in Papua New Guinea and with people who'd never been exposed to modern life, to television, to movies or anything. And he set out initially thinking there won't be a universal human emotions. We won't be able to have universal expressions because every culture is different. And actually his research showed him that in that respect that Darwin was correct. There are certain things, there's lots of culturally learned gestures and expressions and so on, but there are some that are universal to every single human being. And how they work is as follows. So we have the voice. We have the way to express ourselves verbally, our verbal style, what we actually say, and not only what we say in the content, but also the tone, the volume, the pitch, the pace, and these all vary depending on what we're thinking and feeling. And then on the other side, you see on the left side, we've got facial expressions. And the facial expressions are the ones that I'm going to concentrate on this evening, because the face is the primary or clearest channel of communication through which the emotions are expressed. And we've got what we call macro expressions. That's where you can see it very clearly. and it's held for for a while, maybe for a few seconds or maybe even a bit longer. Then we've got what we call micro expressions. These are the ones that you can't fake, you can't pretend them, because they're so fast that they're not actually able to be managed by the conscious mind. They have to be run by the autonomic nervous system, what we might call the part of the subconscious mind. So I'm going to come back to those later. We have subtle ones that are very small. You have to spot them carefully. And we also have, which is not on the slide, but we have mixed, where we have a blend of different emotions showing on the face. So these are the physiological ways that we demonstrate emotion through those channels of communication. And behavioral psychology studied emotion for many years, and we've now got a big body of research evidence as to how they're triggered, how they're experienced and expressed. And as I said, we're going to concentrate on the face because that's the easiest one for you to start learning and recognizing those expressions, those facial expressions. So what are emotions? Well, they are physical events in the body. People talk about the body and the mind as if they're two things. Well, actually, we're one continuous being. I'm not going to get into the spiritual side of it, where maybe the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. We talk about energy psychology, transpersonal psychology. I'm going to concentrate on what we know physiologically and psychologically about emotions, that when you have an emotion, there is a change in your body that affects you chemically and electrically. Emotions are what we experience physically and in terms of our emotional and physical feelings in response to some kind of stimulus. So that could be actual, could be something that happens. It could be something that we've just imagine, we think something and we immediately start to have an emotion that goes with it, even if it's not actually really there. And also when they're relived through memory. So some of the characteristics of emotional responses. First of all, emotions are rapid. They are triggered in a fraction of a second. In the case of micro expressions, which we'll talk about later, it's a 1/5 to a 35th of a second that emotion will be experienced and registered. They are coordinated and organized. That means to say that there is a whole system of communication between what goes on in the brain, what goes on in the nervous system, through the body, and it's all got very good reasons for being there, but sometimes they're triggered unnecessarily, or there are mistakes in how we interpret those triggers, but the whole system works really, really smoothly. There are external signals that are reliable. I mentioned the facial expressions, and also there are internal reliable expressions of emotion, but those we have to use equipment to get, because obviously they're not showing on the outside. So we've got, for example, HRV, that's heart rate variability, and HRC, heart rate coherence. That's what the heart rate does when you're experiencing different kinds of emotions, when you're in a relaxed state or when you're in a tense or stress state. GSR refers to the galvanic skin response. That's to say the way electricity, the electrical, bioelectrical frequencies that go through our body, how fast or slow they go, and that will reflect how tense we are and how relaxed we are. And it's possible to measure these things with quite simple equipment. There's more complicated equipment which will measure our brain waves and record what's going on electrically and take graphs of that. And what we've got is also neurotransmitters. That means measuring chemically, so what's going on in the system, whether we're producing stress hormones and chemicals, or whether producing the so-called happy hormones, the endorphins, serotonin, and so on. So the function of emotions in human beings is entirely constructive and positive in terms of what they're meant to be doing there. People talk of negative and positive emotions, and Dr. Ekman says actually there's no such thing. There are emotions that have got functions. When they become dysfunctional is when we react in ways and we have emotions that don't actually help us to manage situations. So their function is to motivate our behavior. For example, anger. You can see someone looking pretty angry there in that picture. We don't need to actually read subtle expressions there. We can see once the mouth comes open and someone yells, you can pretty much see they're angry. The evolutionary purpose of anger is to actually get past someone that's getting in our way, get something that's out of our way to block us in pursuit of our goals. So it has a function. Anger is also useful when it comes to being able to have righteous anger, to change something, to right a wrong. When anger becomes destructive and gets you into the big trouble mentioned there, is when the anger is not appropriate, it's disproportional, we can't do anything about that situation by getting angry in that moment. Sadness, if any of you saw that movie Inside Out, will know sadness had an important function. If she was ignored, if it was all about being happy and joyful, we wouldn't actually be realistic. The fact is that that little girl in the movie is feeling very sad and unhappy about the move that her parents have made. So unless she expresses that sadness, and sadness's function is to let people know things aren't okay, you need support. So all of the emotions we have, and I'll go through the key ones later on, are to actually have a function. They're essential to help us build relationships. They can save and enrich our lives, but if not managed, if inappropriately used, then they can obviously get us into big trouble. And that's where emotional intelligence comes in. So here you can see a diagram of an emotional timeline. This is an illustration of the emotional timeline. Now, here's an example, okay, of how this works. You're walking along a path, and out of the corner of your eye, you just notice something. And what happens is, automatically, without you consciously needing to do this, this happens, as I said, in a fraction of a second, your autonomic nervous system conducts what we call an automatic appraisal. So in response to this trigger, it checks into your emotional alert database to see whether this thing that you've seen out of the corner of your eye represents a danger or a threat of any sort. Now, in this particular case, it comes up with a match. The emotional alert database brings up a picture of a snake that's coiled there, and within milliseconds, the appropriate affect program is activated. It now gets all the things to happen in your body in order to respond to this threat that you think you've seen, which is that you've seen a snake. So the body's impulses are generated. The adrenal glands will give you a shot of adrenaline. All the resources will be diverted to help you run away. And in the case of fear and running away, the stress response gives the blood is pumped to the legs and the extremities so you can actually run and scoot out a bit. However, at this point, you're also going to be affected by the learned display rules. The learned display and feeling rules come into play, which depend on how we've been raised and conditioned to deal with our emotions, and also our emotional profile, what sort of personality we have. So in some societies and situations, running away would be seen as being cowardly, and you're not going to do that. So the person might squash that feeling of fear and stand their ground and get ready to fight that snake. Someone else would probably just run away without a second thought, absolutely terrified, without stopping to think about it. Now, once those emotions have been generated, we have what we call the refractory period that comes into play. And the refractory period is an interval between the initial impulse appraisal and the cognitive processing or reappraisal to say, is this the right reaction, where we do start to consciously think about it. Now, in this case, we have a look again at this thing we saw out of the corner of our eye, and we realize it's not actually a snake, it's a coil of rope. It wasn't a snake at all. So now the alarm signal can be switched off. Even though the emotion's been set off, it starts to fade. So you've got about 15 to 20 seconds after the initial alarm was set off to go, it's okay, it's just a coiled rope, it's not actually a snake at all. The problem is that once the emotion's been set off, even as it starts to fade, it gets more easily triggered. So a typical example would be you've had an angry day, a difficult day, you've been repressing your urge to express your frustration and anger all day, and then you get home and some trivial thing happens and you completely blow it. You lose your temper because you feel safe to vent the anger in that situation. And the more we practice or act on our potentially negative emotions like anger, the easier it is for us to activate them. And if we keep going into that refractory state of experiencing, whether it's fear or in this case anger, I'm talking about the angry day, then that anger starts to become a mood. We experience it for longer than just a few minutes. It starts to become something that we do every day, and eventually it becomes part of our personality. It becomes part of our habitual state that we're an angry person. Now, when someone's being angry, aggressive or insulting towards us, we may feel justified, perhaps hardwired to be angry back. And as I said earlier, the purpose of anger is to energize us, to get past anything or anyone who's blocking our way of threatening us. It's an active state. It enables us to be courageous, to challenge injustice, to bring about positive change. And in that state of arousal, as I was saying, the blood flows, in this case, to the upper body rather than the lower body where you need to run away and have your legs to run fast. And the upper body allows you to strike out and take action. Now, the problem in modern life is that mostly that's entirely inappropriate. Just because someone annoys you, you don't just punch out at them, shove them out of your way. You get in big trouble if you did. But the problem is that in modern life, most situations that anger is designed for, in the primitive stress response, is not appropriate to act it out. So then we tend to stuff it, we tend to block it. And then we start to get into a state of stress and running stress all the time. And one of the things that emotional intelligence is all about is allowing us to bring in awareness so that we realize that emotion that was generated, the fear of what we thought was a snake, but it's not, it's a coiled rope, or anger towards the boss who may have just been having a bad day themselves, to start to actually come in, and I'm going to show you a technique that's very good for this, to actually start to stop yourself at that moment of feeling the emotion triggered, to start bringing in awareness at an earlier stage and bringing in mindfulness so that you can start to take more control of your emotional state. So what are your hot triggers? Because we all form our emotional alert database by evolution, and actually human beings are born with only 2 programmed responses of automatic fear. And I can't see all your names on there, but I don't know if anyone wants to unmute and say what they think those evolutionary responses that we're born with, the 2 fears that human beings are born with. Anyone like to say? Anyone have an idea about this already?
Yeah, it's the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises.
Absolutely, excellent. I don't know who it was that said that, but well done. You get a brownie point. So those are the 2 things we're born with. Everything else we actually develop is as a result of our experience in various ways in life. And of course, so that means different people will be triggered by different things. And the other thing is our learning and experience. So that's what we learn. If we learn that we go and we touch something hot and it burns us, we very quickly learn not to go near something that looks like it's fiery or hot. But only as you said, the loud noises and the fear of falling are the ones that we're automatically born with. They're triggered by what people say, what people do. We often blame other people for triggering our negative emotions. The thing is that we can't control other people, except to some extent. What we can do is control our own emotional responses, start to become really aware of our own emotional states. And one of the ways we can do that is actually by experiencing and learning how it feels when we're in a certain state. And also in the courses that I run, the longer courses, not just the short webinar, for example, starting to do things like mirror work, to actually recall through memory what a time when you were angry, say, or a time when you were sad, or a time when you were happy, and then look at your face in the mirror whilst you actually experience that memory of that state. Another thing you can do is to physically reenact it. Actually take up the posture, the stance, pull the face that you know goes with the feeling. And it's very interesting. I find particularly, unless someone is a real drama queen and likes to look at themselves in the mirror and pull faces and admire themselves and practice different faces, you sometimes see kids doing this. Most people have no clue what they actually look like when they're angry. And it's very scary to another person. When another person starts to feel angry, they can see it in the face, even when the person's saying, no, I'm fine, thank you. So as we go through, and in a bit we'll have a look at these different emotions, I'd like to invite you to practice by either remembering something or pulling that face to feel what it feels like when you have that emotion, because the more you're aware of those physical signals in your body, the way that you feel and where you feel it in your body, the more you become aware and the more you can do something to intervene with that hot trigger before it starts to get out of control and that you go into a refractory state that I mentioned before. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the development of positive psychology. One of the things that happened in the beginning in psychology is that Freud and many others, I'm sure you've heard of Freud, I mentioned him because he's very well known, but all the early people who worked in the field of developing what became known as psychology, psychotherapy, psychoanalysis and so on, what they did is mostly studied people who were ill, neurotic or psychotic, especially patients who were in mental asylums, as they were called, where it was believed that that was it, you couldn't do anything, they were going to be mad for life. And we refer to that in Transformations Institute, that model as being deficit psychology. The idea that basically human beings are murderous, carnivorous, incestuous, and beasts, and society is required to keep us under control. And in Freud's view, the problem was that society was required, but he wrote a book you may have heard of called Civilization and Its Discontents, where he talks about the fact that sometimes we're so repressed that our repressions start to become neurotic and we start to become unhappy, unhealthy, and potentially psychotic. But over the years, psychology's developed. We've developed, firstly, more evidence-based scientific studies, because Freud, it was all case studies and observations. There was no actual science empirical research in the early days. But as we've learned to observe behavior, both in animals and in people, by the mid-20th century, many psychologists and therapists have started to say, you know, there's something more. It's not just about observing behavior, but it's also about starting to understand what makes people tick. And you may have heard of Abraham Maslow, very famous for his pyramids of needs. He was the first psychologist to actually say, why are we studying people who are sick? Why do we study people who are neurotic and unwell if we want to know how the human mind works, human behavior, what makes us tick? Let's start studying well people. And that was the beginning of what we might call humanistic psychology, psychology of being, where we started to look at the fact that people were basically okay. They had resources, they were creative, but the problem was that they got messed up by their lack of understanding, societal pressures, situations that they were in. And what we needed to do was to cultivate those positive aspects of people's personality. And positive psychology, which was first really launched as a formal academic discipline, we now have academic degrees, masters and so on in positive psychology. There was a manifesto written by these two guys, Martin Seligman, who'd done research on things like flow, how athletes and musicians and people get into a state where they just let things flow and things go well and they perform really well. And the guy on the right side, who there's actually a YouTube video on how you pronounce his name. It's more or less Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Csikszentmihalyi. Sorry, I'm Hungarian. This is a Hungarian guy.
Oh, well, then you say it beautifully. Say it again beautifully for everybody.
So it's Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
There you go. And both of them produced this, thank you for that, in 1998. So we're only talking about just over 20 years ago, a manifesto for positive psychology that said, you know, people are basically good, they're resourceful, and there's something even better, not just humanistic, but if we start looking at people who achieve well, who do even better than we expect, and start to model that, look at how they do it, then we're going to get a scientific understanding and effective interventions so that we can build thriving individuals, families and communities, rather than looking at people as being broken and needing to be fixed. So I just want to say a little bit about how positive psychology is now finding that it's not just about theories and opinions, but it's actually being backed really solidly by neuroscience. Because over the last 20 years or so, there's been huge developments in neuroscience that's actually demonstrating that what positive psychology, and those of us who've been practicing positive psychology before there was even a label for it, is actually accurate. And we've got here a diagram of the human brain. We've got the dopamine pathways, and they are produced in the frontal cortex, and their functions are reward and motivation, pleasure and euphoria, motor function, the fine-tuning of it, compulsion and perseverance. And the serotonin pathways, which, by the way, it's showing them as being in the brain, but some of you who work in mind-body areas in therapy may be aware that in the last few years we've discovered that actually about 80% of our serotonin is, someone's got feedback, so can I just stop a minute because it's quite hard for me to hear. Someone's got feedback, so the switch off.
Dr. Aziz, please.
I think someone's got their mic on and we're getting feedback from it, so that's better. Great, thank you very much. No, it's on again. If you're not using your audio,
Dr. Aziz Mitadi.
Yeah, I can hear some range problem, I think. 1 minute.
Can you switch off your mic, please, because it's causing
Dr.
feedback.
Leila, you can mute him yourself.
Okay.
Click his name.
Who is it that's coming from? I think it's gone now. Okay. I hope everyone can still hear me. Okay, so where were we here? Right, so the serotonin I was just saying, which has the functions of affecting mood, memory processing, sleep and cognition, it's showing the brain here, but actually about 80% of our serotonin is stored in the stomach. So actually that link between gut and mood is very powerful. So the idea that it's only the brain is really out of date now. But what we can do to naturally increase the endorphin effect, which covers both the dopamine and serotonin pathways, is to practice mind-body skills. we can actually use our neurology to change our physiology because of the neuroplasticity. The human brain is quite exceptional from other mammal brains in this way. It's able to reorganize neural pathways based on new experiences. So if we can just get past what hypnotherapists like to refer to as the conscious critical faculty, that filter that tries to stop us from taking on new ideas and to think about things in terms of ways that will change, it's there for a reason, to protect us. But if we can actually tap in to that neuroplasticity by working with the subconscious level of the mind, and we can do certain practices which actually help to do that, we can literally retrain our brain's emotional responses. So instead of being triggered by, I don't know, for example, you're terrified, have a phobia of spiders, it's very easy to very quickly change that into a different state by doing certain practices, certain ways of doing things. Of course, certain ways of thinking are more effective than others, but we can literally, it's sometimes called brain re-entrainment, we can change those neural pathways. So instead of that trigger going off down the same old pathway, we can get it to go somewhere new and somewhere different. So what are the mind-body skills that both are the most effective to boost our emotional intelligence, our EQ? Well, top of the list is breathing, because just about every system, breathing is there, because breathing is the only autonomic nervous system function that we can take over instantly by conscious control and get certain effects with it. You know, we can do that with practice. Sometimes it takes a long time of practice to affect our heart rate, our pulse, different elements of the body, but anyone can just for a moment stop and pay attention to their breathing, change their breathing rhythm, take a breath if they've stopped breathing, breathe in, breathe out in certain different rhythms. We can also use biofeedback. I don't know if any of you've used biofeedback, but there are two main kinds. One measures the heart rate. I referred before to heart rate variability or heart rate coherence, and HeartMath, the Institute of Heart Math, does a lot of work with that. And we also have the galvanic skin response, which I mentioned, which is something which allows you to actually measure the speed of the electrical frequency, the messages going through the skin, that can very quickly give us an indicator of how relaxed or how tense someone is. And the best biofeedbacks, in my opinion, are the ones that combine the galvanic skin response and the heart rate variability. So you can train yourself to actually be able to manage your state, to be able to affect your heart rate. And of course, when your heart rate is in coherent state, then it's actually puts you into alpha waves, sometimes even theta, and that's the way that that's the condition, the brainwave state in which your immune system is most effective. And that's highly relevant at the moment to the health scare situation that we're going through at the moment, which is why we're also running webinars on using these techniques to actually change our states and overcome fear and anxiety and panic situations. Biorhythms I meant to mention. Again, biorhythms became very fashionable in the 70s and 80s. They seem to have dropped out now, but biorhythms are very useful in terms of letting you know what your ups and downs are in terms of active or passive energies, and the days when your system is switching from one to the other. And we've actually got 3 sets of biorhythms. Again, I'm not going to go into detail on this, but you can always follow up with me if you want to. And we have emotional, we have physical, and we have mental or cognitive biorhythms, which go up and down all the time, and they can make a difference to how our responses are. The most easy to measure is the physical responses, because your physical responses are up to 6 times slower on days when you're having what we call a biorhythm quotient or critical day. So being aware of your body's biorhythms. Self-hypnosis, autogenic training, and I put that there in a category, but actually it pretty much goes alongside meditation and mindfulness. Anything where you take control of your relaxation response, put yourself into a state of relaxation and learn to do that so that you can actually switch off the stress response and switch into the relaxation response, because that's really what hypnosis is. I've mentioned EFT, meridian and energy therapies. EFT, for anyone who doesn't know, emotional freedom techniques, tapping, using the traditional Chinese system of meridians. There are many different kinds of energy therapies. Sorry? Someone said something? No, I didn't get that, sorry. So if you want to type something in a box or let me know, oops, sorry, I clicked on ahead. Okay, so these are, I'm just going through some of the most popular and effective mind-body skills Meditation and mindfulness, as I said, really goes along with the self-hypnosis and autogenic training. We have Buddhist mindfulness practices in cognitive behavioral therapy. There's now mindfulness-based CBT, dialectical-based CBT. So a combination of using your cognitive, rational, conscious faculties, combining them with the subconscious faculties in order to be able to get both the conscious and subconscious mind to work together as a team and stay in a state of relaxation, unless you need to be in a state of active, getting away from something, fighting something off, or being active in a physical sense. Now, coming to activity, we've got movement, exercise, yoga, tai chi, and so on. The thing about movement and exercise is that they burn off the stress chemicals in the body, and they trigger the production of the endorphins, which are, I mentioned before, the body's natural feel-good hormones. And the other thing about endorphins is that they are very powerful in terms of overriding pain and managing pain. So endorphins, when produced in the body, are actually up to 200 times more powerful than the strongest medication, the morphine-based medication. So again, if you can learn to actually disassociate from discomfort, then that's a very good skill to have. Though of course you shouldn't use it wrongly to overcome the body giving you natural signals. So yoga, tai chi, these not only give you exercise, not aerobic exercise of course, but they do give you balance and good control. They give you better physical flexibility and so on. So all of these are in those mind-body skills. Imagery and visualization and drawing artwork, things like vision boards and mandalas, these actually tap into what's referred to often as the right brain, to the imagination, to the subconscious mind, and connect it with the conscious mind. We've got journaling, genograms, family mapping. And something I want to say about journaling also is that when you write things down, you activate a different part of your brain than you do when you're in the state of an emotional reaction. And so writing about things enables self-reflection, disassociation, and the ability to zoom up, to chunk up, and look at the whole picture in a more disassociated way, not to be in the grip of an emotion if that's causing you difficulty in actually getting past the situation. Positive rituals, which might include prayer, playing music of certain sorts, using sound and sound therapy, things like gonging and singing bowls, using color, and setting positive kinesthetic anchors, as those of you who've done NLP will know how to do, to induce positive emotional states, and developing mindfulness and calibration to be able to understand not only ourselves, but the skills to read other people more accurately. Now, some of you may have heard of this guy here, Sean Achor, who's a professor of psychology at Harvard. If you haven't heard about him or seen any of his TED Talks, I strongly recommend that as soon as possible, you have a look for Sean Achor. I don't have time in this presentation to show you his, there's about a 12.5-minute, 15-minute TED Talk, which is absolutely brilliant. If you want to hear a really good exposition focused on what positive psychology is all about, he's the guy who's been doing his own research and also collating research from others, and come up with research on emotion of happiness. Because as you'll see on the slide, for many years now, when emotions have been studied, it's been all about fear. But now we're starting to look at happiness and what generates happiness, rather than just fear, but happiness. And on the spectrum of emotions, what is it that makes people happy? And you'll see a few extracts down on the left side of the research. Unhappy employees take more sick days off a year. People who journal, in this case a study of nuns over a 10-year longitudinal study, live longer, nearly 10 years younger in this case, because they wrote up in their journals things that were enjoyable, good, the positive things that had happened, rather than all the bad things that had happened to them. In Toronto University in Canada, they found in a study that mood changes how your brain processes visual information. In fact, your peripheral vision is improved, and your ability to concentrate and see information that's in front of you is clearer. And this is a good one, especially now, nowadays and in the current situation. If you're feeling sick, you want to make sure that your doctor is in a positive state, because a study found that when they sent patients to see doctors who were primed for happiness made the right diagnosis twice as fast and showed more creativity in their treatment than the other group. So if your doctor is really unhappy looking and really doesn't look well, that is not a time to actually get the best advice and treatment from your doctor. And if you want to know where that unicorn comes from, then watch Sean Acor's short TED talk on the happiness advantage. So I'm going to tell you what came out of his research. And the interesting thing about Sean Acor's research is that actually he has studied people all around the world, not just in Harvard and the students there and in the corporations in America, but he's actually studied in developing countries and communities, and he's found the same outcomes across all cultures and organizations. And some of these outcomes you've seen on the slide. I'm going to show what he actually recommends that you do. And here, these are the things that he found by doing these practices, and he called it the happiness advantage, how to prime yourself for happiness. And I'll show you what they are in a minute. Some of you may already be familiar with this, but for those who aren't, really take note of this. You're welcome to take a picture of the slide if you want to, and he also goes over this in his talk. So these are the things that come out of that research, that if you do these things consistently every day for 21 days, and we're probably going to be on lockdown for at least another 21 days, so you've got no excuse not to do them. The things that they achieve are physical and psychological health improvements, productivity, for either working from home or when you go back into work if you're in a workplace. It primes us for creativity, innovation, and problem solving, because when you're in stress, the learning centers in your brain shut down. When people shout at you, punish you, give you a hard time, that's why so many school experiences are so negative. It switches off learning and it just switches on survival and fear. The practices enable us to make and sustain more neural connections, so we actually get better connections in our brains, and increases the dopamine and the serotonin, the endorphins. So here are those practices for those who don't already know them, and for those who do, good for you, keep on doing them. The 5 daily steps are, firstly, to write down. You can think them, but it's more powerful, as I was saying before, to actually write them down. You're engaging more senses, and you're also actually able to reflect more consciously on what you're doing. Write 3 things that you're grateful for in your life, and preferably 3 new things each day. If you have to repeat the same ones, fine, but think about it from a different angle. So the attitude of gratitude, or as Dr. Joe Dispenza says, being in a state of gratitude and appreciation actually means that you're in a state of receivership. You're more able to actually receive good things if you're constantly focusing on the good things that you have. Secondly, write for at least a couple of minutes about something that you feel good about, preferably something that's happened in the last 24 hours. And that could just be a really small thing, like, didn't feel like getting up and doing my meditation, but I did it. Didn't even feel like brushing my teeth, but I did it. Anything at all that's good that you did, that you know is a positive thing that happened in the last 24 hours. I mentioned exercise before, and in this case, it's any activity that raises the resting heart rate. So it's not slow yoga or Tai Chi, but something that actually gets your heart going. And that could just be dancing around the room, jigging up and down on the spot, going up and down stairs quickly a few times, but every day, not 2 to 3 times in the gym, and that you've got an excuse now because you're at home for weeks and can't go to the gym. Every day. Meditate, focus, or visualize, and that includes self-hypnosis, a breathing technique, anything at all that actually enables you to go into a calm, relaxed state, and then focus and visualize on something positive, something you enjoy, something that makes you feel good, that gives you a warm feeling in your heart. And the 5th thing is performing random acts of kindness, and that's not even paying it forward. That's not doing something with the expectation of getting something good back, but just doing something for the sake of doing something compassionate or kind to somebody else, because that actually puts you in an extremely positive state and mood. So what he found when he actually went back to the people who'd been doing this after 9 months was that the people who'd done the 21 Happiness Day program, even if they weren't consciously continuing to do the exercises every day, were still experiencing the same benefits which I showed you on the slide before last. So whilst you're in lockdown, and then continue, keep up that 5-step daily program, encourage your friends and families and colleagues to, and you'll find that you will become more happy, healthy, creative, resourceful, successful, and these effects will last. But remember, 21 days in psychology, we generally say to build an automatic habit. So you do need to do it daily, regularly, and don't skip a day or think, I'll do it later. So I'm going to do a quick technique with you before we go into the facial expressions next. And this is one that I'd rather just do with you. It's there, again, if you want to take a picture or to find out how to do it. It's about the simplest pattern interrupt or brain break technique. It's one that I learned a simple version of many, many years ago, and I've adapted it and put my own stuff into it. So I'll ask you all now, just for a moment, to close your eyes down and just say to yourself in your mind the words stop, and then take a deep breath in. And as you breathe out, just relax your face, all those little points, stress points around your eyes, your jaw, down into your neck, shoulders, arms, and into your hands and fingertips and thumbs. And then with the next deep breath in, breathe out down the front and back of your body, down through your legs, down past your knees, ankles, and into your feet. And then just imagine below your feet that you've got a great big magnet or some kind of vacuum that can just go and just draw out of you any tension, any tightness, any physical tension, discomfort or dis-ease, any bothersome thoughts or anything that's distracting you. Just let it be pulled out through the soles of your feet. And then just take a few comfortable, quiet, easy breaths whilst you focus on something you enjoy, someone you love, something you like doing. Imagine doing it even better. If you'd like to relax now, just think of something that's relaxing. If you want to be energized, think of something that energizes you. But put your total focus for a few moments now on something that makes you feel good. And you'll know when you feel good because you'll feel a nice, comfortable, warm feeling in your heart. You might even feel a smile coming on your face. And then what I'll ask you to do before you come back into the room and open your eyes is just to rub the palms of your hands together. Just give them a rub so that they're warm from the friction of your palms, and then put them over your eyes. If you wear specs, you can just push them up before you open your eyes. Put your palms over your eyes, and then come back into the room and have a stretch, feeling just relaxed and rested. Now, if you do a quick version of that stop technique, it takes you 15 to 20 seconds, and it's a great way, going back to that earlier slide, of coming and becoming aware and doing an interruption before the refractory period kicks in on the stress response. If you have a few minutes, spend a bit longer doing it. You can do it as a way into doing any relaxation, self-hypnosis, meditation technique that you like. So that is the stop technique. Now, I'm going to finish by going through the universal facial expressions. And these are the ones I mentioned before that Dr. Ekman researched. Some people are saying there's more. He's looking possibly at an 8. But I'm referring to the absolutely sound, peer-reviewed to the nth degree, 7 emotions that have got reliable universal facial expressions, unless, and there are a few unlesses, someone's had an injury that's actually damaged the nerves. We've had people in our classes sometimes have said, oops, I've got to tell you right at the beginning, I won't find it very easy to pull some of the expressions because I've had Botox and that stops me from communicating. And I'm not having a go at anyone. If you want to have cosmetic surgery enhancement, that's fine. But bear in mind, it does affect your ability to convey your emotions the way that they are just designed in us to show. It's very difficult to show surprise and fear properly. Sadness, again, it will interfere with if you're not able to use your eyebrows in the way that they're designed. So the 7 emotions that have got reliable, now again, I'm not saying there's only 7 emotions, there's families of emotions and many, many subtle variations under those, but the ones that have reliable facial expressions that we can know are absolutely universal across humanity are sadness, anger, surprise, happiness, fear, contempt, and disgust. And in these pictures, you can see somebody's doing better than others. Tim Roth, the actor who played the character in Lie to Me, for anyone who saw it. If you haven't seen it, do get hold of series 1, at least the pilot episode, because it's a really good, a good fictional, entertaining account of Dr. Ekman's research. And in fact, he was the scientific consultant to the series. And he says about the first series, especially, about 80% of it was scientifically accurate. Some was just drama. And a lot of cases were based on his own cases, working with the FBI and the CIA, border control, and so on. But he first did this work, bear in mind, as a psychologist, as someone who was interested in human emotions, and as a therapist. So I'm going to take you through them. I'll pull them and do them. I encourage you, you don't have to come on the video, but remember, for the ones that are what we would refer to as the uncomfortable or difficult emotions, don't hold them for too long, because they will start to affect you. Just as things affect you when you pull the faces and have the emotions, if you reenact that emotion, it will start to stimulate the feeling that goes with it. So sadness particularly, and anger, don't hold them for too long. Okay, so facial expression of surprise, and this is why I'll just part my fringe so you can see my eyebrows. The entire eyebrow goes up, the eyes are pulled up because of doing that, and the mouth hangs open. It actually drops like this. Now, it's rapid and it only lasts for a second or two. So it's not the same as the startle response, which is ducking away from something that's thrown at you. And that's one of the mistakes that's made in the Light to Me series. He throws something at an audience in it and they duck like this. Says, there you are. That's genuine surprise. No, it's not. That's a startle reflex. Surprise is when you see something, hear something, or get information that really takes you aback and shocks you, surprises you. So if someone holds it for more than a second or two, you know there's something going on that's being faked. I'm not saying they're telling a lie, but you're not getting the whole of the truth. So for example, okay, talking to your child. All right, so who broke that? Who broke that precious ornament that's lying there on the floor? And they go, ornament? Broken? I really don't know anything about the ornament that's been broken. That was a lot more than 1 or 2 seconds. You know there's something fishy going on and you need to start probing what actually happened if they're holding the surprised look. And surprise doesn't last long because it's what we call a way station to the other emotional responses that follow. You're usually surprised for a moment and then you decide how you actually feel. So you come home before lockdown, you've been out at work, and you come home and the door opens, you're just looking forward to having a nice quiet evening because it's your birthday and you're looking forward to a quiet evening in with your family, and you didn't really feel like going out to do anything, just be with your family and have a quiet evening. You open the door and 20 people jump up and go, surprise, surprise party, and you go, and then you maybe find, that's very nice, but actually you're feeling, oh no, that's not what I wanted. Or you may feel really pleased, really delighted, and then you'll express that. So surprise is a way station, and it's a short one. You can see what it looks like. Now, sometimes people get confused between surprise and fear because the eyes widen with fear as well. But in fear, the eyebrows are pulled up and together. So they're not just like this up, but they're like that. And the upper eyelids are pulled up and the mouth stretched, not dropping down as in surprise, but it goes sideways. And so the surprise was the way station. It was the sudden, oh, taken by surprise. Fear is where there's a threat of harm. And what happens initially with fear, there's a moment, and that's why really the stress response is not just flight or fight, it's freeze, then flight or fight. So you freeze in that moment, and then you tend to run away if you're afraid. And you may also even gasp, and so it might look like this, because you pull yourself away, you're trying to get away from the thing that frightens you. So that's the facial expression of fear. And what we call reliable muscles is that there are identified muscles that you know, if you see that, even if the person doesn't show you the bottom half of the face, you can't see, but you see those eyes, then you know you're seeing fear, the facial expression of fear. So I hope you've been doing that too while I've been demonstrating it. I'm going to be asking you to identify them shortly. Here's the differences, fear and surprise. So you can see, sometimes people get confused, but they are quite distinctive. The mouth is spread wide in the fear, and the eyebrows come together. In the surprise, mouth drops down and the eyebrows just go straight up. So here we've got disgust. And in disgust, it may be triggered by an unpleasant smell, taste, image, or sound. Dr. Ekman says he thinks that the evolutionary origins of disgust might be to actually flatten the nostril, to reduce what we're seeing through our eyes because we see something gross. Maybe something's rotten, something smells bad. And in disgust, as you can see now, the eyebrows don't go up, they're pulled down, the nose is wrinkled, and the lips are loose. And it may be triggered by an ew or a yuck sound, ew, like that. The reliable muscle is where the upper lips are pulled up, and when you do that, automatically your nose wrinkles. Now, this is not the same as going, oh, how cute, 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 cute. It's ew, like this. So I hope you've all been doing this for yourself. See, I can make a fool of myself, so you're entitled to do it. You're not on video. So that's disgust. And here we have anger. Now in anger also, the eyebrows are pulled down, the lower lids are pulled up, but so are the upper lids are pulled up, but so are the lower lids. So it's not as wide as surprise and fear, but they're glaring. Now, unless they're shouting, and then you really don't need to have emotional intelligence to know someone's pretty peed off, But if they're not shouting, they could still be expressing anger. And when that happens, then it's a reliable muscle, is the margins of the lips are rolled in like this. So when someone does that, they are angry, whatever they're saying. No, I'm fine. And the chin boss tends to be pulled up or thrust up because it's being pulled by the lips. Obviously, they may shout, threaten to express the anger, and the trigger for anger, as I was saying before, is anything that gets in the way of us achieving our objectives. And if you look at yourself in the mirror being angry, and if you find it difficult to do just by the face, then as I say, think of an experience you had where you felt really angry, you felt really, really annoyed, and have a look at your face and think about how that looks, especially if you've got children or people that are shy or reserved and they look at you with that face. It's pretty scary when someone is angry. They've actually done some research, I'm not going to show you pictures, I don't have time, of showing victims who'd been attacked a number of faces and saying what did they look like just before they attacked you, to see what is the most, the expression most allied to someone making a psychotic attack, just completely losing it when attacking someone. Now, if you can just see the difference between the anger and disgust, okay? See over there on the left, we've got anger, and there on the right, we've got the disgust, the wrinkled nose, the pulled up lip, and the ear expression. Now we come to one which is actually the easiest to tell once you've trained yourself to start spotting these expressions consciously. The eyes stay neutral in contempt, so nothing much happens in the upper part of the face, but in the lower part of the face, the reliability of this is that it's on one side, and it's the only unilateral expression of emotion. And contempt is when you tend to feel superior towards someone. You're looked down on someone or something, you feel rather smug about yourself. Whereas with disgust, it's the most reliable indicator, by the way, discussed in the previous slide, as to whether a couple will stay together. Done research on this. Dr. Ekman's research was collaborated with by someone called John Gottman, who runs courses, he and his wife, on couples counselling and so on. And they found that when couples repeatedly showed micro expressions of disgust or contempt, they were a very effective predictor of relationship difficulties, and they came to be able to read expressions when couples were talking, not arguing, but just talking about everyday things. They could predict with 95% accuracy which couples would stay together, would still be together in a few years' time, just by watching them talking and the way that their facial expressions. But remember, these are micro expressions. What we're looking at are macro. They're being held, you can see them clearly. Micro expressions just flash on the face really quickly. The person doesn't even know that they're doing them, and the other person doesn't know that they're doing them either, unless they train themselves to learn to observe and see these. And you can get to be very good at it with a bit of practice. Now we've got the facial expression of sadness, and this one, genuine sadness, is extremely difficult to fake because it involves the inner corner of the eyebrows being raised. And it's actually difficult to do. Good actors can do it. You know, those of you who watched Game of Thrones or other movies, the actress that plays Daenerys has got great eyebrows for showing sadness, and so is Jake Gyllenhaal, the actor. Their eyebrows go right up in the middle, and Dr. Ekman found he had to use electric probes to get his to actually make the right expression, because it's not easy to fake that. The eyelids are loose, the lip corners are pulled down, and as I was saying earlier, Botox and surgery can mask the eyebrow lift, as in surprise and fear, but it's very hard to fake the lift of that inner corner of the eyebrow. So when you think about something sad, something that makes you unhappy, if you're not really unhappy about it, it will tend to show in the eyebrows. Some people are very good at making themselves cry, and I've watched children sometimes very good at faking it, and they can produce the tears even, and they can do all that, and you see absolutely nothing going on here. It's probably they're manipulating mum or dad. And facial expression of happiness. And Professor Richard Wiseman, you may have come across him in his Luck Factor and other research. He's a professor of psychology who's the first person to actually research luck. He recommends that if you want to know how to make someone smile, get them to put a pencil or a chopstick in their mouth. I meant to have a chopstick here to do that, and I haven't, but if I put a pen here, if you push it right back into the back of your mouth, It's very hard to hold that in there for very long without actually smiling and often bursting into laughter. So when we run our workshops and we're allowed to do them face to face, we have some chopsticks so you can practice that. Now, a true smile, this is a real smile of happiness, the outer eyes tighten, crow's feet. The things that people try and get rid of when they want to look young and beautiful are actually your character lines. They tell you how often you've been smiling in your life. In smiling and laughter, the cheeks are raised, the lip corners are pulled up towards the temples. This is a genuine smile. Now, which one of those is a true smile? Is it the one on the left or is it the one on the right? Anyone like to unmute their mic and speak or say?
I think right one.
You think the right one
Yes.
is the true smile? And why is
It's
that?
the left.
You're right. You're
Look at
right.
the eyes.
You're right.
My right. Well, you're seeing it on the screen. I'm asking you on the screen seeing it. Is it the right or the left?
Left one for me,
And why do you say the left one?
Yeah, the left one.
because it is feel very enjoyable, very happy mood.
Okay, those are emotional words. If we get technical and behavioral and observational, what can we see
It's
going
the
on the left?
tightening of the outer corners of the eyes. They're more
Mhm.
tighter than the right one, so that's more of a genuine smile.
Yeah, because the lips could go like that or like that. In fact, the one on the right, the lips aren't going up so much, so that might have some of you who might think you're being tricked think, oh, it's the one on the right because the other one's making it too obvious. No, the lips are not the main thing here. Yeah, the lips do come up. It's the eyes. And the one on the left, if you look compared with the one on the right, there's not much happening on the right. On the left, you can see the eyes are squeezed up. You can see those crow's feet that I mentioned. And there's a reason for this. If I just show you a little bit of anatomy and physiology here, you have these muscles around the eyes called the orbicularis oculi. Bit of Latin for you. I don't know if any of you are Latin scholars, but I did study Latin, so I know I've got that right. And they're known sometimes as the donuts. And what happens is when you smile, they squeeze up like that. They squeeze. So the donut squeezes, and that's what causes that wrinkling. And then what pulls your mouth up is the zygomatic major. And you think, you know, some people are geeky. Dr. Ekman's definitely geeky. He and a colleague of his actually have written a books and a course on this. It's called Facial Action Coding System, and they have codified every single muscle in the human face and how it relates to expressions that express emotions. So as I said, unless you've got some damage, some physiological damage, we all do the same expressions, but you have to take the baseline because, again, some people have got injuries or Botox or various other things that have interfered with their ability to express emotions. So now it's your turn. Remember, these are macro expressions. If you want to get really good at this, you've got to do the micro expressions, and there's online training and ways you can do that. But okay, just a few of you at least chip in and let me know which emotion have we got here.
Sadness.
Yep, yep, sadness, well done. What's that?
Happiness.
Happiness.
Great, you should all be calling out together, to be fair. Okay, when we do this live, we have people write it down and then check no one's cheating. What's that one?
Disgust.
Yes. How do you know it's disgust?
The nose area.
And
The lip muscle coming
And the
up, the
lip
reliable
Muscle coming up and causing this wrinkling of the nose. Yeah, good. What about this one?
Contempt.
contempt.
Yeah, contempt. Why?
The
lips.
The lips of one side goes up. The one side.
One second. See, you can have an extreme contempt like I'm going to do now, or you can have a slight one. So you can have just a little indication, or you can have a big one. This is a fairly subtle one, but we can see it, and it's one-sided. And you know, sometimes it isn't a negative emotion, contempt. Well, the thing is, the person feeling it feels superior, so they tend to quite enjoy it. And sometimes you have people, we call it duping delight, who are telling a lie or getting away with something, and they're trying to pull a face where they're looking serious or a bit sad or whatever, and you see this little like that. And the duping delight is very much associated with contempt. They have contempt for others because they're not seeing through the fact that they're leading them on and telling them a porky pie. What's that one?
Anger.
anger.
Yeah. And how do we know that?
The lips are pressed together.
Nose,
The eyebrows in the middle.
the
That's
chin,
right. Okay, good, good. So
The
that's
lip
anger.
corners are rolled in.
Yep.
chin and the lips.
Mm. The lips, the reliable muscles. Mm. But remember, if they're angry enough to actually express it, then they're going to be going the mouth open.
Mm.
And that,
Fear.
Fear. Fear.
yeah, it's, I think somebody said surprise. It's sometimes people confuse. So how do we know that's fear?
The mouth is open.
Which direction?
On the eyeball. Eyeball.
The eyeballs are open wide, but what are the eyebrows doing? They're up, but they're also,
Inward.
yeah. So they're coming in, the eyes are open, and the mouth is open. And sometimes I said, if you see it moving, the head will go back slightly because they're trying to get away from the thing that they're afraid of. So yeah, that's fear. And this one is?
Surprise.
Yeah. So you can see that, again, until you really get to know these, you have to sometimes think carefully about this. Micro expressions, when I first did this work and did the micro expressions, I wasn't really paying too much attention. I knew what the expressions were, thought, yeah, no big deal. And I got a bit of a shock because after I did the first test online, I got 30-something%. And I'm not a person who's competitive with other people, but I like to do my best myself. And I thought, what? So I actually spent a couple of hours going through the micro expression training, and then I got up to about 90-something%. So then I thought, yeah, I want to get good at this because if you blink, you'll miss it. Because remember what I said, it lasts for a fraction of a second, a fifth to a 35th of a second. And the reason why Dr. Ekman was able to discover these was actually by watching a video of a patient who was in a psychiatric unit where he was working at the time. And it was a woman who'd been very depressed and suicidal, and she'd been in psychiatric care. And she came to see the panel to ask for a weekend out, you know, for a pass. She said, I'm feeling much better. Therapy's helping. I want to go home and see the family. And she did a very good story. And everyone was, yep, that's fine. And they gave her a pass to go. And then a bit later on, she came back and she said, I can't go through with it. I feel really bad. I feel really guilty. And they said, what's the matter? And she said, well, actually, I was lying to you. I was planning to go home. I knew they would be away this weekend, and I was planning to go home and commit suicide because I'm feeling really, really bad still. And Dr. Ekman thought to himself, well, how on earth did we miss that? So he'd been doing videoing because he was doing research. So he played the video really over and over, and then he slowed it down and started watching it on, you know, slowly, on frame by frame, and there he got it. And in the middle of her saying how she was looking forward to going home and she was feeling much better, he got a micro expression of anguish, you know, extreme pain and sadness. And he got that, but only it just lasted for that fraction of a second. And that was what started him actually researching on the whole subject of micro expressions, because those are the ones we pick up subliminally. That's how we often know when someone's telling us a lie or doesn't feel right, but we don't know how we can put our finger on it. And of course, some people are much better liars than others because they practice a lot more, but there are other things involved in lie detection, not just facial expressions, body language, gestures, all that, which we obviously don't have time to go into. So you did well on that for the macro expressions. I hope you do well on the micro expressions. So now remember to use the stop technique, go follow up the happiness advantage and do that daily practice if you want to become more emotionally intelligent and improve your happiness advantage. And as I said, if you're interested, we used to run the GCC Region Centre for Dr. Ekman for 3 years. So we were teaching his courses. We're not doing that anymore. So we don't have time for that. But he does do, as I said, online training. I don't think there's anyone teaching now. For other people take his stuff and they incorporate it, but he's very picky about how you teach it because he wants to know that people are doing it accurately, because there's a lot of stuff that's nonsense about body language that's taught, for example, and his stuff is all stuff that's very sound and peer reviewed. So if anyone's got any questions or observations or anything, please go ahead and ask me now. Switch yourself on to ask and then switch off if it's giving feedback, so I can respond.
Oh, just one question, if you don't mind.
No, I'm fine. And I'm saying I know we're slightly over a bit, but as we started so late with the technology, we're actually well within the hour now from when we started. So if you're in a rush to go, I totally understand. You can leave the meeting. But anyone who wants to stay around a little bit longer, that's fine with me, because, and I'm so sorry for that. As I said, it was outside my control. But I hope that we've caught you up and engaged you despite that clunky beginning.
Yeah, very, very nice. So my question would be, is that how big of a percentage, because you mentioned this is more like a generalization of the major expressions, because it's known that everybody's different, and although they differ from the micro expressions, but how big of a percentage are the macro expressions correct?
Okay, as far as Dr. Ekman's research goes, 100% but you have to allow for the Botox, the injury, the nerve damage or whatever. But once you know someone's baseline and you can see what else is going on, then you're pretty much 100% in terms of the macro expressions and the micro expressions, because they're the same thing. It's just the micro done very much faster. Now, as I said, there are partial, there are subtle blends. There's squashing, which I talked about before, where, for example, when he did research with Japanese students, there's some cultures where it's considered to be very offensive to elders or authority figures if you show a lot of emotion, whatever kind of emotion in their presence. So he did some experiments with Japanese students, nursing students. He showed them pictures of really gross things that would make you feel disgusted or upset or scared. And their expressions were pretty much the same as any other culture. And then he brought in a professor or an authority figure and did the same thing with another group of Japanese students, and they had far less reaction, far less obvious reaction, because they'd learned by their cultural, remember I said cultural and learned display rules, they were there, but they were much, much more impassive in their faces, because all their lives they've learned you don't show emotion around authority figures. And so you have to actually obviously make account. But if you're asking me, are there different ones culturally or individually? No, when it comes to those basic ones, we're all the same. But gestures, those are very culturally specific. Again, you have what we call the display box. There is an area around that. Within that, it tends to be conscious. People are acting in a way that they're aware of. When it goes outside of that box, very often it's when they become unconscious. And he's had there was a very amusing video of him videoing some students where they didn't know, but he deliberately had an academic that they had to go and see for a tutorial who was deliberately being extremely rude, contentious, nasty, undermining. And then he videoed them. And there was one young lady, he said to her afterwards, do you think it's okay to give your professor the bird, the finger, the rude gesture? And she said, I would never do that to my professor, of course not. And then he showed her the video, and she'd been totally unconscious of this. This was not happening at a conscious level. Her hand on her leg was actually going like this on her leg. So we tend to do things outside of the immediate box of our awareness. That tends to be where the subconscious expresses itself. But there's a lot of interesting, as I say, it's a whole subject in itself. If you're interested in the verbal side of it, there's a guy called Udo Undeutsch, although he's called Undeutsch, he's actually German, and his work on content, when people were being dishonest, when people were lying, when people were being inconsistent, he did the content to the extent that actually in Germany and some of the courts in Europe, not in America, I don't think, witness statements can be subjected to this analysis to actually see whether it's a consistent and likely to be a reliable or honest witness statement. So that's actually used as part of the legal framework there, because it's being found to be so reliable. So there is a lot of reliable science in this, but the only one you can say 100% is those facial expressions, as long as the muscles aren't being impaired from expressing them. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. As I said, when Dr. Ekman went out to do this work, his PhD research, his mentor, his PhD supervisor was someone called Professor Sylvan Tompkins, and he was a Darwinian, and he was sure that there would be some kind of universal expression of emotion expressed through the body, through some kind of expressions or gestures. And Ekman didn't believe that. He thought it would all be culturally determined. So he was quite surprised when he found that amongst Stone Age New Guineans, as they were then, I know New Guinea's changed a lot since then, but people who'd never been exposed to the same influences as those in the developed world actually had exactly the same interpretation of what something meant when they were shown photos of people putting different kinds of faces and expressions. And that was where he started doing it all over the place. And he found in all the cultures he went to, traditional, modern, all that, there were those things that were, we would say, universally human. Anybody else got any questions about that, or any of the other things that I was talking about on the happiness advantage?
If I may ask, first of all, thanks so much for doing this. I have just a question and a thought following Vivian's question about cultural, cultural bias on expressions. I can definitely see that we do perceive the emotions regardless of that bias. But if you look at the picture of the person smiling, we might likely to believe and trust the person on the right more than the person on the left, which is.
And why would that be?
I don't know. Maybe just in a social setting, we could. I'm not saying that's something I feel, but that could.
Well, you know, he calls that the social smile, the one on the right, where you go.
Right.
And that's because it's a healthy survival. It's necessary to do that to survive. If your boss comes up to you and you're standing getting some water by the water dispenser and says, "How are you? How are you feeling today?" You don't want your boss to know that you've just, your wife's just left you, that you've just contracted a terrible disease, that you've just had some awful news in the family, that you've been caught out in something bad. So you say, "I'm fine." And they have this social smile. But
right.
If you're actually, again, emotionally intelligent student of body language, if the boss has been on a course or done a training, they may well look and think, but then they might not want to say, I'm getting a mismatch, I'm getting an incongruency between what you're telling me and what your face is saying, because they want the person to go on and get on with their work. They don't want to hear all about their troubles and their difficulties. So it's what we call, I don't like this expression, but it's one of Dr. Ekman's, social lubricant. It makes life easier. It makes life smooth. We lubricate situations. He's written a great, interesting book called Why Kids Lie, and he actually had his daughter and his was it daughter and stepson, or the other way around? But anyway, he'd raised these as his kids. One's a stepchild and one's a natural child. He got them to write a chapter each in the book when they were younger, and some very interesting research on this. For example, they took a community in Africa where they were same cultures and all the rest of it, tribal culture in Africa. And they went to the two schools that the kids went to in the local schools. And one was a school that had a very, very strict policy on honesty. It was considered to be a very high value, and you got in big trouble and were punished a lot if you were caught telling a lie. The other school, same kids from the same background, but going to a different school, different values, lying, what they call white lies, small lies, were not considered to be a big deal at all. There were other priorities, other values that school held high. And when he did some research on how well the kids lied, guess which kids lied really well?
Yes, and the second ones, the ones that were allowed to lie.
Nope.
Oh, the ones in the strict school, I guess.
It was the ones from the school.
The honesty
very
school.
Strict. They learned for survival reasons. They learned how to be able to come across very convincingly that they were telling the truth. They rehearsed it. Again, good liars tend to take as much as possible of truth and incorporate that into their story. Good liars will actually remember their story backwards and not just forwards, because when you tell a lie, you make up a lie, you tend to make up a construction. And then if someone asks you, now go back to tell me what happened at the end again and what happened in the middle. If it's a true story, you're much more likely to be able to come in at various points and remember those bits. And there'll be lots of little incidental details. There's all sorts of things in there. Someone who's practiced that lie will come off really smoothly. There'll be no hesitation. They'll have rehearsed it back and forth, and they'll be able to hold eye contact with you. Some people have the idea if your eyes are moving around shiftily, it means you're dishonest. Not at all. Some good liars will keep their eyes on yours because they want to see how you're reacting. Are you believing them? They want to hold your eyes so that you're not noticing any fidgeting that might be going on. As I said, it's a very interesting topic, but I've been focusing on the emotional intelligence bit and the bits that will connect us rather than the bits that will pick out the cheats and the ones who are the smugglers or the potential terrorists or threats or whatever, because that's more in the field of law enforcement and security. If you'd ever told me once upon a time I'd be training the security staff of Saudi Aramco, Ministry of Interior staff, or airline security staff, I'd have said, you must be joking. But I actually ethically squared that with myself, that at least it means they're using scientific means to get to the truth rather than beating it or torturing it out of people. So that was my my take on that. I'd rather people understand that if you brutalize people, they're likely to tell you anything that you want, and it won't necessarily have anything to do with the truth. It's just a desire to stop the pain or stop the interrogation. If you sleep deprive people, they're going to hallucinate and they're not going to know what they're saying. So, you know, torture is not a great way of actually getting to the truth. Anything else anyone want to ask or comment on? Anybody going to actually go out and watch the TED Talk and start practicing the happiness advantage right from tomorrow? Great, glad to see some thumbs up there. He's written 3 books that I'm aware of anyway, and they're really, really good. And I didn't, you know, I mentioned Richard Wiseman, but his books are excellent too. There's one, 59 seconds he wrote, because a friend said, look, all this self-improvement, self-development, I live a busy life, I haven't got time for long meditation, tell me things I can do where it just takes 59 seconds, no more than a minute. So he's written a book of things you can do in less than a minute. But his research on luck is very interesting. And if anyone has ever seen Derren Brown, the first of the sort of generation of mentalists we have now, Derren Brown actually did a program on television in the UK, which was all about a village with a lucky dog. And he based it entirely on Dr. Richard Wiseman's research. The only thing is, being Derren Brown, he didn't acknowledge where he got his ideas from. But he turned around this village where they were all being lucky, they were winning things. The person who was the least lucky, believed he was the least lucky, actually won money on the draw that they had, the lotto draw. So it's all about how behavior can actually change. You know, we talk about law of attraction in a very energy, spiritual, mystical way, but actually a lot of the law of attraction stuff is the way that you behave. The characteristics of lucky people, again, emotional intelligence applied, some don't realize they're just naturals at it, is that you go and talk to strangers, you chat to people that you meet, you engage with people, you're constantly looking for new opportunities, you're very persistent, even to the point where it seems crazy to people that you're still trying to do something. There's a whole bunch of psychological characteristics that he found in his research actually make up what are supposedly lucky people, and that people who are not particularly lucky can actually change their luck by starting to adopt some of these behavioral characteristics and behaving more emotionally and behaviorally like the people who are lucky people. So that's very interesting too, and it fits with all the stuff about auto-suggestions, positive suggestions, thinking positively and so on. I'm always interested personally, not just in I mean, I practice meditation daily and a lot at the moment with being in lockdown, and I think it's great to work at that level, but I'm also interested in the things that people can do, even if they don't have any spiritual practice at all, by just changing their mindset and their attitude can affect very different results in their lives. So we're all about, can we find ways to demonstrate that? That's why I like biofeedback, because someone goes, oh, I don't believe in all this stuff. You just go, fine, put them up to the biofeedback and get them to breathe in a certain way and see that suddenly they can actually put their heart into a coherent state. They can put themselves into the alpha state without even practicing, you know, years of meditation or yoga. And some people who think they're very spiritually wise or superior, we had one lady who was a yoga nidra master one time in our class, lovely lady, but she was always very, you know, posture was great, very erect, moves very beautifully. She was as tense as anything when we put her on the biofeedback. And the first thing she had to do was just to relax her shoulders, let her head slump a bit, and not be constantly holding herself in that state. And then she was able to start relaxing more. So some people think they're relaxing and they're not actually relaxing at all. And of course, something like that will actually give you a measure of your heart rate and of your galvanic skin response will tell you whether or not you think you are. It'll tell you, yeah, this is what the state you're actually in. So I'm quite keen to give people accurate feedback as to how their body and mind are responding. So, anyone else got anything they want to ask or follow up on? Otherwise, we can end. Anyone who's still around got anything they want to ask? Okay, so I think that's nobody needs to know anything now. We're going to continue with some webinars over the next few weeks while we're in lockdown. We're also running courses that are paid for courses, which go into more depth and are longer. The next one that I've got, any of you who are still online might be interested in, who are working in the field of therapy or counseling or helping others, coaching in some way, in well-being, in medicine. We're actually running a short, intense cognitive behavioral therapy training, which is an accredited course, a UK accredited course starting on Friday this week, that runs over 3 sessions over 3 consecutive Fridays for 3 hours each Friday. And there will be exercises to do in your own time between the sessions. And there's an exam at the end, which leads to a UK accredited diploma. And so it's on cognitive behavioral therapy and the psychology of depression, grieving and loss. So if you are interested or you know anyone who might be, please put that out there because that starts this Friday.
Oh, if you don't mind me quickly, because I was just writing it down. It's clashing with one of my therapies that I'm doing. However, I'm very interested in it and want to do it at some point. So, do you know the later dates, or you just only
I don't know. You need to keep in touch with Illuminations. We're doing this stuff that we're doing at the moment with Illuminations, and this is our first one that we've done. This is a kind of what can I say? It's a trial run, and it will involve people doing some work on, you know, in between the sessions. What I normally do when I run this course is I run it over 4 days altogether, or 3 long, 2 long days and 2 evening sessions. But we're doing this as shorter. We're going to talk about whether we do the next one as a longer one, and it probably will be Fridays or Saturdays because that's the time that for most people is convenient. And I know a lot of people are home at the moment, but then they're having to homeschool their children in the mornings and so on. So, but yeah, we keep in touch with Illuminations as to when the next one will be. And also, you know, if there's anything you want to ask me about it personally, Illuminations will put you in touch with me so that I can talk to you about it. But it's intended for people who are not just complete newbies coming in off the street, but if they've done something or been practicing in an area where it'd be useful to bring CBT into the mix, then CBT is very straightforward, easy to learn, easy to apply, and so it's one that is a modality that's very useful to people in all sorts of different kinds of therapy and well-being professions.
Yeah. I actually do hypnotherapy, family constellations and starting NLP, and it's just because NLP is on the day, I can't go there, but I will probably see you on the next one then.
What's the timing? Sorry, can I just ask what's the timing of the NLP course? I don't know it.
Oh, so the NLP one again on the 17th, and that's the first day. So
get that. Someone,
yeah.
Madam, is this certificate course your cognitive?
Is it all day then? Is it all day?
It's from 9:15 until like 6.
Because our one is, if we're doing it as a 3-hour session.
I will double check it again. If it's not,
okay. Yeah,
I will definitely go for it.
Yeah, by all means. When we're doing online training, I will not do more than 3.5 hour blocks. Then we have a break, like a lunch break or something. Then we come back and we might have a comfort break until 6. They are good luck to them. And also it worries me that we might lose the bandwidth and so on if we're on for too long at a time. But yes, our first CBT one, we were thinking of putting it off a week or two because it was very short notice, but we hadn't run that one. But as I said, I think we'll probably run another one, but I would look at running that one as longer days, but then you don't have to do work in between the sessions. You just do the post-course exam. So that's what we're thinking of doing next. And it obviously will be more expensive than the first one because the first one is charged on the basis of it's just 3-3-hour sessions. But keep in touch with Illuminations and they'll let you know whatever I'm doing next. But at the moment, I'm the only person I know of that's actually teaching a UK accredited CBT course in the UAE. And like you're saying, hypnotherapy, we also for many years been teaching UK accredited therapy, clinical hypnotherapy with psychotherapy and counselling courses, and so we find CBT is an absolutely good combination with hypnotherapy because it deals with the pre-talk. CBT in the pre-talk to work with conscious cognitive mind, and then you can do your hypnotherapy and work with the subconscious in the second part of the session. So it's very complementary. Many of our hypnotherapy graduates that we've trained, not Illuminations, but I'm saying to Illuminations people, anyone who's trained in hypnotherapy will find CBT a very useful modality to add. Anybody else got anything?
Thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome. So I've done my bit now. I've answered any questions. As I say, if anyone thinks of a question after, please ask Illuminations to put you in touch with me, and you'll find, as I said, I'm not sure whether they'll manage to do it tomorrow or the day after, but this week, this session will go online, so that if you missed any, or those of you who have problems with hearing or you know, any technical aspect of it, should be able to watch the whole thing recorded online. They'll play the rest where we actually did manage to interconnect with you. Okay, so thanks very much for joining me this evening, and I hope I'll be in touch with you again soon, and hopefully the sooner the better, in person and face to face once through all this. And Phil will, my husband and business and life partner, will be doing courses, short courses, as well as free webinars, all about applying positive psychology techniques to coping with fear, anxiety, and so on. So that's practical applications again, but focusing specific on the challenges economically, emotionally, social isolation, and so on. So Phil did his first one last Friday, and we'll be publishing a schedule through Illuminations soon of the follow-ups. Okay, so good night, folks. Have a good night, sleep well, and remember, first thing in the morning, write down 3 things to be grateful for, good that's happened last 24 hours, do some kind of exercise, whatever it is, do some meditation, breath work, and go inside and focus inside for a bit while you're shut inside, and do something kind or compassionate for someone else. I heard a really good tip on that the other day from something I was listening to. Someone said, right, if someone's still alive, that you would, I mean, you could write letters to people who have passed away and do, you know, clearing letters and closure letters, but if someone's still alive that you feel has contributed to your life and made a positive difference to your life, write a letter to them, send it to them. Nowadays we can do that by email and so on, and then arrange to call them, phone them or Zoom them or whatever, WhatsApp them, Skype them, that you can talk to them, and then actually have them read your letter out loud to you of your appreciations for what they've added to your life. Let them read it out to you while you listen, and apparently it's having brilliant effect on people, boosting their oxytocin and their endorphins and feeling really, really good about each other and themselves. So spread the word on anything that helps. Bye-bye, Dr. Aziz. Good night. All right then. Good night, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.